Well, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I'm here today with Christopher Kunney, and we
Correct.
are really looking forward to interviewing you today, Christopher. Christopher is the managing partner for Infinite Options Technology Consulting, and we'll certainly get a chance to learn a little bit more about what your company does. But before we get to that, fill us in a little bit. Give us a glimpse into your personal life.
Sure. Well, I've been in the technology industry for a while now, 30 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, time flies, right?
Yeah, you've got
having,
experience.
right, having worked with a wide variety of organizations, that spent a number of years with companies like Hewlett-Packard, Versal Technologies. I've taught as an adjunct professor. And most recently have worked in the healthcare space over the past probably 12, 15 years now
Okay.
with various healthcare organizations, but also has served as Chief Information Officer for a local healthcare institution here in Atlanta, Georgia, Piedmont Healthcare. But over the past 7 years now, 6, 7 years, have been working as the managing partner for Infinite Options. And we are a technology and business management consulting firm with a focus specifically around the healthcare space. And we do everything from technology and business integration services to technology assessments and strategic planning. We assist our clients with system acquisitions and implementation. We work as well on the compliance side, primarily on the privacy and security side with
Okay.
assessments and remediation work,
Uh-huh.
as well as we do work on the administrative side in areas like lifecycle management and business process analysis and optimization. As well as, we've acted as interim IT leaders for our clients, having what we call the virtual office of the CIO, where we help our clients who may not have a full-time CIO or in transition or haven't had that person in place, but they need senior leadership to help lead them through business and clinical transformation efforts,
Okay.
technology efforts. We serve in those capacities. And we also act as advisors to tech companies. Some of our clients have been organizations like AT&T. We've done work with Samsung. We've done work with companies like Ricoh. And we've actually worked with tech accelerators who have assisted startup companies to launch their products into this space as well.
Wow.
And in terms of the types of technologies we work with everything from electronic health records to claim systems, data center and cloud services, cybersecurity, analytics and data warehousing, patient monitoring systems, and clinical and diagnostic systems, as well as network and system performance and monitoring tools and others within our expertise as well too.
Kind of a buffet table of IT services.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and actually, interesting enough, we also work with some academic institutions. We've helped to develop some curriculum around healthcare IT certifications, and we've actually
Oh,
helped to deliver that curriculum as well. So.
great. Is that part of your, were you able to connect with that because of your adjunct professor?
It started that way. It's I've had a passion for education all my life. My father was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. My
Oh,
sister was a
really?
teacher. So it's
Oh,
kind
that's
of in my
cool.
DNA. And
Yeah.
we were approached by some institutions to help them with some of the certification programs. And so it was something that I had a passion for and still do. I enjoy teaching and educating as
So
well.
what did
So
you want to be when you were 7 or 8 years old?
wow, probably president of the United States, like everyone else, and a firefighter and, a superhero, but interesting enough, I was somewhat of a nerd for a kid. As a kid, my parents used to buy us chemistry sets and model rockets, and we were one
Good
of the first
parents.
kids. And I grew up in the 70s and 80s, so I'm a little probably older than you may think. But we were one of the first kids on the block to have an Atari, a video game.
That's cool.
Right. So technology, technology and science has always been something that I've had a passion for.
Yeah.
And as I started learning more about computers, I really developed a passion for that. and ultimately ended up going to school and getting a degree in computer science and
Great.
mathematics. I furthered my education with a master's in management and technology.
Fantastic. Well,
Yes.
tell us something that people don't traditionally know about your career.
Interesting. Throughout my career, although I've, been in the technology field for quite a bit of time, I actually for sometimes served on as a quality manager, and
Oh,
I
you did?
got really into the Deming methodologies around process improvement
Okay.
and continuous quality. And so I served as a quality manager for a while when I worked for Hewlett Packard. So I still have a passion around business process analysis and improving operations from that perspective as
Great.
well. And then,
Great. So
I
you're
think
well aware of quality management systems and
absolutely.
the ISO 9001
Yes,
standard.
absolutely. I have a so that's kind of a second passion of mine too, taking processes and breaking them down and then finding ways to optimize and improve them as well.
Okay. Yeah, your background and what you're doing today is coming together. Well, talk us through a time when you failed in your career, and I want to unpack that moment if you don't mind.
Interesting. That's a good question. Back in the late '90s, when the dot-com bubble was at its highest, everyone was, developing websites and getting into e-commerce and, um, really just taking advantage of anything that had www in front of it. And right,
Yeah.
and so I also hung my hat out there and started heading towards those opportunities as well, and actually bought a company back then that developed websites. Little did I know that I was probably about 6 or 8 months right before the whole bubble burst.
Oh, really? Yeah, yeah. How
And
could you know?
right, how would I have known, right? And so I had
Yeah.
actually quit my job, started my company full time, and was starting to actually grow the business, and then the entire market collapsed,
Oh my
which
goodness.
was devastating for
Oh.
me because I quit my job. But,
Yeah.
but it was an interesting learning as well too. It was where I started to discover my passion for education, because
Okay.
one of the things I did to bring in income once that business failed was to become an adjunct professor, and I started teaching. I think the other, and at that particular time, I started investigating emerging industries. And one of them was in healthcare in particular. And I used to tell my students, I taught a class in strategic thinking and problem solving. And I was telling my students they need to look at trends and understand where trends are going and take advantage of those trends if they want to maximize, their efforts. And at that particular time, this whole healthcare industry was starting to emerge, and healthcare technology in particular was
Right.
emerging. And so as I was telling my students that, I was looking at myself in the mirror and saying, well, why aren't you also taking advantage of these trends and getting more involved in that space as well? And
Right.
so I took my own advice, started interviewing for some healthcare organizations locally, was able to secure a position as a manager at one of the local healthcare organizations. And then about 6 years later, 5 years later, I actually became the CIO for that
Wow.
organization, and maintained and managed that for a while, and then moved into the consulting space after that. So
That's that's
we
impressive,
definitely,
Christopher.
thank you. Well, we definitely turned lemon into to lemonade, and here I am today. Having a passion about it, very much. Healthcare technology is a part of what I live and breathe on a day-to-day basis, and I would not have been in this industry had that situation not happened.
Christopher, as you were talking about things that you had shared with your students, I felt like you were talking to us and talking to the
Hmm.
audience. What other lessons do you feel like, other than looking at emerging technologies and analyzing your environment? What are some other lessons that you'd want to share with our audience about that time when you had that failure?
Absolutely. I think the biggest lesson that came out of that, and it's something that really drives me even till this day, I always ask myself when I'm venturing off into something either uncharted or an area where I'm a little apprehensive about it, I always ask myself, what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't work out, it fails, you bomb,
Yeah.
and can you survive it,
Yeah.
at the end of the day? And 99.9999% of the time, the answer is always yes. I can survive it, and I can learn from that experience. Every failure is not an indictment on who you are as a person, as an individual. In fact, I believe we learn
Well
more
said.
from our failures than we do from our successes. And
Yeah.
it shapes us, our character, and who we are. So, failure for me, I look at now as a learning a part of the learning process, not, something that means I can't succeed. It's not the number of times you fall down. It's actually the number of times you get up that ultimately count. And as long as you get up more times than you fall down, you will ultimately be successful. If you look at, famous people like Thomas Edison, who, failed hundreds of thousands of times trying to discover, the light bulb, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately figured out
Great
the right,
example.
combination of technology and elements and, sure luck, maybe to some degree, and completely changed our world now. So
What gives you
that's
the
something.
vantage point that you have of, I mean, sorry to interrupt.
No, no, that's okay. No, please.
I'm just curious, something in your background that gives you that vantage point of, hey, if I fall, I'm just going to keep getting up. Is there something in your background or somebody in your background that has helped you to gain that type of perspective?
That's a good question as well too. And as I reflect on that a little bit, I actually think it has to do with my grandparents and my parents, who were really role models for me. My grandmother, who unfortunately passed at the age of about 94, was a college graduate, and
Yes.
that was literally unheard of for someone of her generation to have gone to college, and not only gone to college, but to then become an educator and teach. My father as well, who followed in her footsteps, became a teacher and not only got his BS degree, but went back and got his master's as well
Oh,
too,
wow.
and was also an entrepreneur too. He
Oh,
not only was an
really?
educator, but he also ran several businesses. And so I
Okay.
think I got my entrepreneur spirit from my father, and my willingness to use education as a tool for success. And then just the sheer determination and will that they exhibited in the times that were much more challenging than I'm experiencing today. But yet they were able to, accomplish their goals and be very successful in their own right. So I think I owe it to those who came before me, who really laid the path that you can achieve anything you want with the right effort, the right determination, and for me, the, prayer as well too.
I'm glad you put that plug in as well, and thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
It is encouraging to all of us to know that eh, you know people look to people and
Absolutely.
and really leverage the experiences that they've had in life to then be a
Exactly.
springboard for us.
Absolutely. And I think the other lesson is, and unfortunately in this time of instant gratification that
Oh,
we live with,
yes.
with, reality TV and, all the bells and whistles of technology that we have, which I'm a, big proponent of it. It's part of my business. Um, we do have to invest time and effort into our lives, and anything worth having is really worth working for. And I think the way, whether it's the universe or God or however whatever created
Beliefs.
our reality, nothing comes easy. Nothing
Yeah.
that's worth anything comes easy, and if it did, we would never really gain really an appreciation for it as well too. So understand that whether or not you're trying to grow a business or trying to lose weight, or trying to get a
Yeah.
college degree, whatever it might be, it requires effort and requires a
Yeah.
commitment on your part to see it through to the end.
Yep.
And that ultimately this determines what your real character is going
I
forward.
love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And that's what we're talking about. And I appreciate you bringing that all in, and wanted to now transition a little bit more into more of the options and, infinite options, technology consulting.
Sure. Absolutely.
What is the most, I guess, most important priority right now
Right.
that your organization has?
Well, like all companies, it's to grow, to continue to be sustainable.
Sure.
But I think also more importantly, to be really relevant in this space as well. Having worked in other industries and then coming to healthcare at the kind of midpoint of my career, I saw, quite honestly, a lot of the glaring gaps and challenges that existed in this emerging market and the change that was taking place. And I think I was able to be somewhat successful in my rise from being, an operations manager all the way to a CIO, primarily because of all the experiences I brought from the other companies I had worked for and the things I applied in the healthcare space. And so after assuming that role and after realizing, there's all these tremendous opportunities that are before us to transform this industry, I wanted to then become really an evangelist for that. And to not only work with one organization, but to work with many organizations and help them transform the way they deliver care, primarily through the use of technology and best business practices. And I kind of think of myself as a Ronin samurai. If you know, a Ronin samurai is kind of a samurai without a master, but still has a passion and wants to do good. And so
That's cool.
we kind of adopt that credo in our company that we're really the Ronin samurais for healthcare IT.
That's cool.
So you can call upon us if you need help. We're there to defend you and help you and support you meet your goals. And I've been able to also align myself with other similar like-minded professionals that have been in this industry to bring that same type of passion. And collectively, we are trying to do our part to transform the industry.
What do you feel like are some of the challenges that the healthcare industry is facing today with privacy and security?
Oh, that's a good question. I think outside of interoperability and finding more cost-effective ways to deliver technology to our constituents, our providers, our clinicians, cybersecurity is absolutely on the top of that list. There is a concerted effort, as I'm sure you know, by cyber criminals to attack healthcare organizations, primarily because there has been a lack of really appreciation for the vulnerabilities that exist in our current infrastructure. And I think many healthcare organizations take the kind of ostrich approach where they stick their heads in the sand and don't believe it might help. It might not happen to them. And I would, suggest that most healthcare organizations have already experienced a breach. They just don't know it yet, and they don't know how severe it is. It could be something as simple as a flash drive being lost with some patient information on it, to a laptop, to an internal person who's went into a patient file and looked at something inappropriately, to actual external forces that have been able to penetrate the security infrastructure and now are either holding their data hostage or actually taking that data and selling it on the black market. And so I believe that it is one of the number one, if not the number one priority that healthcare organizations should be taking and making an investment in as it relates to technology. They must secure their perimeter, both externally and internally, because data is now the new currency, and healthcare data is platinum on the black market.
And why? I mean, what is it about healthcare?
Primarily because if you look at traditional identity theft and what's traditionally sold, your social security number, your mother's maiden name, your address, things like that, that typically runs for somewhere between $1 and $5 on the open black market.
Okay.
where if a cyber criminal is able to secure patient data, which includes not only all that information in many cases, but also information about their insurance and other critical pieces of data. That information can be as valuable as up to $50 per record on the black
Wow.
market, primarily because those cyber criminals can sell it and to others who might want to enact insurance fraud, both on the private and public sector. And so there's millions of dollars of insurance fraud that occurs on an ongoing basis, and others who may not have insurance buying someone else's insurance information and using it for their own purposes.
Would you say, Christopher, that the concerns are more internal concerns with security breach or external?
I'd say probably overall that more of the concerns are external. I
Okay.
think folks, organizations don't realize that there's a significant amount of vulnerability internally. Again, with employees who may not necessarily even be malicious, but just not aware that some of the things that they're doing can compromise patient health information. For example, walking away from their computer with, an application open with patient information still on the screen, and somebody being able to walk by and capture that information.
Oh, yeah.
Leaving a laptop that has PHI on it in your car, and your car gets broken into. Taking pictures of patients' information on your cell phone and texting it or emailing it to another individual, and it's not encrypted. Opening up, phishing emails that have phishing software
Links.
that's attached to it, links that are
Right.
attached to it,
Mhm.
and then it starts to penetrate your internal firewalls.
Right.
Or patients printing out PHI, leaving it on their desk, or faxing it, and it's sitting on the fax machine and not monitoring that information. I mean, so there's all sorts of internal factors that of negligence that can come into play that put an organization at risk as well, along with those external factors.
So with, I mean, there are all these factors, Christopher, but I love your analogy about the ostrich in the sand. I mean,
Right.
why is it that doctors just turn the shoulder to things that could destroy the reputation, cause their practices to be shut down? Why
Well,
is it?
again, and to their credit, doctors and clinicians, nurses, and other healthcare professionals are focused on their core mission, which is to deliver care to the patient. And so
Yeah.
they are focused, and their time is spent on delivering care. It's just really been recently in the past, 8 to 10 years, where doctors and nurses and clinicians have had to now rely on technology as a core component of that delivery of care as well. And just not
Right.
being
Good point.
sensitive or aware that there are risks associated with that. I would also build a case that, even when we were a very manual and paper-driven process, we didn't really have very strong security measures there either. I mean, if someone could go into a patient's record and copy it
Yep.
and put it back in the file cabinet, and who would really know that
Yeah.
took
Yeah. We
place?
see that in the movies all the time.
Right, exactly. So I think, again, it's somewhat just lack of awareness and appreciation
Yeah.
that it can happen to themselves. But even more so now that we are more automated and we're working in an electronic environment, that risk of getting not only just one patient records, but hundreds of thousands of patients' records in one fell swoop becomes even a higher potential liability for an organization. And so it's about education, it's about awareness, and unfortunately, sometimes it's just about seeing the impact that it has had on organizations who have been affected by a breach or what the government may call willful neglect, just deciding you're not going to do anything about a potential risk.
Right. I like what you said about doctors being busy with patients.
Mhm.
They're busy with so many different variables. And one of the reasons we brought you on the show, I thought you'd be an excellent interview is I know a lot of what you do is help doctors to learn how to do more with less. And so,
Absolutely. Yeah, no,
So
I'm sorry, finish your question.
yeah, I just wondered if you wouldn't mind unpacking a little bit more of if you were to present your case in front of a doctor in terms of how you'd help them do more with less
Sure.
to to manage all of these IT concerns.
Well, I think that's a very good question. And really the challenge of the day as organizations start to become more dependent upon technology. How do you, first of all, deliver it in the most cost-effective way? And then
Sure,
secondly, how do you make sure that you're putting in place the right types of systems and infrastructure that help to protect and secure the data?
that's a great point.
And I've kind of developed this philosophy. It may not be my own, but I've come to this realization that IT is really the next utility within our business environments, and let me expound on that a little bit.
Yes, please.
Just like we think about the water that we use in a company, or the lights, the electricity. Most businesses, let's take a hospital clinic, could not function effectively without electricity or water. They're very critical to parts of their operation. And I think you would agree with that.
Absolutely.
I would also say that now IT is equally as important as well too. So many healthcare organizations, most healthcare organizations today, could not operate effectively without some sort of technology. Even if it's just checking in a patient, answering a phone, sending an email, processing claims, using their EHRs. All of that's driven by information technology. I mean, something as simple as, even controlling, the pumps that are in, the patient's room, to controlling the air conditioning system in some organizations as well, are all controlled by technology. And so it has now become really that next utility. It is absolutely critical, a critical tool that organizations need now to run their operations, and specifically to deliver quality care. And so if we put it in that context, we have to think about what's the best way to now deliver that and most cost-effective way to deliver that to our operations. Well, again, most hospitals, most businesses don't generate their own power. Most of them don't have their own wells, and plumbing systems that
Right.
bring water to them, right? They
Right.
get that from utilities, municipalities that provide that infrastructure for them. I would propose and suggest for many of my clients that you look for ways to do that in your own operations. And so start looking to move your infrastructure to infrastructure as a service solutions, cloud solutions, and third-party providers who can and have made an investment in putting in the right levels of security, redundancy, and business continuity into their environments that can ensure, one, that your systems stay up and they're available, and two, that the right types of security are in place to protect patient information as well. And then you move away from having to invest in, things like servers and data centers, and the power required for those data centers, and the cooling required, and the staff required for that, to now buying that on demand. And so buy that infrastructure as a service, buy that software and that application as a service. And the real value you get out of that, just like, in the analogy of the plumbing and the lights, is the value you get is the electricity that comes through that infrastructure, or the water that comes through those pipes.
Yes.
The value you get in IT is the data that comes out of that. And that's where you want to invest your time and energy, is making sure that the information that's coming through that infrastructure is really bringing real business and clinical value to your operation. So those are some of the things, for example, we suggest.
Okay.
The other thing we do is it's an awareness. It's an internal awareness. So we provide education and training and awareness to our staff on what their responsibilities and requirements are. Just like you train the staff not to step in water and touch the light switch, because you might get electrocuted.
Yeah,
right?
not a good idea.
Not a good idea.
Yeah.
You have to also train your staff that you can't leave that screen up. If you walk away from it with PHI, you can't leave that laptop, in your car unsecured. You can't give your password out to your friends and neighbors next door to you, because it's just easy for them to remember in case you forgot it. So there's that equal amount of responsibility that comes with also starting to leverage technology as a part of the way to deliver care. And so providing that education, I think, is also essential.
Fantastic. And so I'm just thinking in terms of, if there was a doctor that wanted to approach your organization to learn about your recommendations,
Hmm.
what do you typically do when a doctor says, "Hey, Christopher, can you tell me more about your company?" I mean, what does a first meeting with a doctor look like where you introduce your services?
That's a good question as well too. So first of all, we take a very collaborative approach. We actually present ourselves much like clinicians present themselves. When you go into the doctor, they walk in the room and they ask you, "Okay, what's going on today?
Yeah.
Tell me what's happening. You got a fever, a cough, cold? Let me check your heart. Let me check your
Right.
lungs." So we take a similar approach. We go in and we ask them, "What's going on? What's your challenges? What are you feeling there? What are your concerns?" And then we do a health check. We do an assessment to try to understand based on what you told us. We'll assess those parts of the environment to try to identify what the root cause of the issues are. And just like a doctor then that would then prescribe a course of action, we'll take this medication, or we have to remove this particular thing that ain't working correctly. We do the same thing. So we'll go through that assessment. We'll identify what we believe are the gaps and challenges, and then we will make recommendations for a remediation strategy to address those issues. And then
Fantastic.
that remediation strategy may be delivered through us as a firm, through a third party, or we may just suggest that, and then the doctor or organization can decide who they want to then bring in. And so
Okay.
we'd love to be a part of the remediation process, and typically are for most of our clients. But our goal is to make sure the client understands what the real root cause of their challenges are and offer them a roadmap to resolve them.
And that can be a challenge unless
Mhm.
you really are meeting with
That's right.
them one-on-one.
That's right.
Because
And what we try to do is we want to be an extension of their company, an extension of their leadership team. And so it's not just about going in and having this one interaction, just like, your primary care physician. You don't just go to that physician one time and then you go to another primary care physician
Oh,
and
okay.
another primary care physician
Uh-huh.
for the next thing. We like to think of ourselves as kind of your primary IT physician. And that whenever you have a technology challenge or a technology problem, you're coming to us first. And we're helping to identify what that issue and root cause is, and then making a recommendation to you on how to resolve it, which again, may be through services we can deliver, or maybe through a recommendation we make for another provider or another organization, or something you might be able to do internally yourself. Here's some things you can do yourself in order to remediate these issues. So again, we try to take a very clinical approach to the way we consult with our clients. And then we try to we look at it from the long haul. Our goal is to have a long-term relationship with them and be their primary care technology advisor.
I'm really glad that you said that, because I think
Right.
one of the concerns doctors might have is, well, maybe they've had somebody come in the past that
Hmm.
has done some work for them, but then they haven't heard anything since,
Right.
and so that ongoing relationship that you develop over time, I think is such a great thing, because it is such a process for so many
Hmm.
practices.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's a journey as well too. You may go in and you may identify, like, maybe many doctors do. There are a number of health challenges you have. You've got high blood pressure, you're a little
Right,
diabetic, you're a little
right,
overweight, you've got all these
right.
things. And so it takes time to go through each and every one of those and try to address those chronic concerns. The same is true with our clients. There may be a host of challenges that exist that require a longer term commitment to remediating those issues. And staying with them through the entire process gives us the history, starts to build a rapport with the leadership team and the staff, and then allows us to help to facilitate the transformation efforts that have to take place in order to get to the final outcome, which hopefully will be a positive one.
I really appreciate that you said that. I wanted to just kind of put a plug in, if you wouldn't mind just helping those listeners know where they can find out more.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. Well, the easiest thing is to go to our website. It is www.iotech, Consulting. Again,
Okay.
iotechconsulting.com. I'm also on LinkedIn.
Uh-huh.
And you can find me by searching for Christopher Kunney, Kunney. I'm also on Twitter, and I do quite a bit of social media blogging and thought leadership there. And my handle is Health IT PROF, Health IT PROF. Or you can just
Okay.
call me at 404-276-0738, which is my direct line, or at 888-699-6992, which is our 800 toll-free number.
Great. And we'll put all of that information in the show notes. Have a couple more questions for you,
Sure.
Christopher. I just wanted to know when you have that moment where you look back on your life, what do you hope your legacy to be with this organization or in your career?
It's funny you should say that. When I hit 50, I think most folks who hit that magic number start to think about legacy. About they feel like there's less time ahead of you than there is
Yeah,
behind you,
sure.
and so I've thought about that quite a bit as well. And like my grandmother and like my father, who were very servant-minded people who taught and helped, were very involved in their communities. I try to do the same as well. I've done medical missions to Africa and helped
Oh,
to
that's
establish
cool.
things like telemedicine programs.
Okay.
I've worked in my local community as a chair of a network of charter schools. I work with various civic organizations, and we go in and we actually expose kids in the inner city to careers in healthcare information technology, or technology in general is where my area is focused. And then most recently, I just did a trade mission to Central America, where I had an opportunity to meet with a number of different folks in that region, from their ministries of health to some of their hospital leaders, to some tech companies who are emerging in that space. And I think I'm going to start having a real passion to try to support some initiatives within places like Costa Rica and Nicaragua, and other areas as well.
Fantastic. Also, looking back on your life, let's say it is the last day of your
Mhm.
life, and
Right.
you had kind of a moment to share three truths,
Sure.
things that you've come to know as being absolute truths in
hmm
your life. What would those three truths be?
There's nothing more important than family.
Yeah.
And so take every opportunity to maximize your time with them. Both my parents are now deceased, and I miss them every day. And
Yeah.
so for those of you who still have your mothers and fathers, please don't take them for granted, because when they're gone, they're gone. And so, as well as, I have kids who are grown and have moved on, and it seems like yesterday I was changing their diapers. And so time travels really, really fast.
Yeah.
So don't neglect those special moments with them. A failure is not a bad thing. A failure actually is something you can learn from, and strengthen yourself from that experience. And so don't look at a failure in any way as a permanent thing. It's only a temporary situation that teaches you how to be a better person
I
in the
love that.
future.
I love that.
And finally, um, find a hobby, be passionate about that, and put that balance in your life. I think it's just as equally important for me to learn about what's going on from a HIPAA perspective, and the regs, and what's happening with interoperability and mobile health, just as much as what I enjoy doing, which is listening to music. I draw, and I do a little painting.
Oh,
I
okay.
play a little saxophone, not as good as I used to be, but
That's cool.
finding those times, to
Yeah.
really, express that other side of the brain, I
Yeah.
think is also equally important as well too. And then finally, there's nothing that gives me more satisfaction than giving, helping. I think one of the most rewarding experiences I ever had was when I was in Africa. And we were there for 8 days, and we saw about 500 patients, and we worked from sun up to
Wow.
sundown, treating them for all kinds of symptoms. And I started out as a tech guy, but ended up helping to administer medications, and take some vitals and brush some teeth, and
Wonderful.
just whatever the doctors and nurses needed at the time because we were so overwhelmed. And that for me was probably the most rewarding thing. So giving back, working in my community and helping people and seeing young people get inspired by your example and the things you do to encourage them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. You're such a great person, and you've definitely given back a lot by being on the show today. Have
And I'm still
just
working
one.
progress. I will say that there's by no means perfection in any sense of
Yeah.
the mind, but I do know that it is a journey, and I'm trying to continue to get better in that journey, and then try to appreciate the journey and not focus so much on the destination.
Boy, that can be challenging for a
Yes,
lot
it
of
can
us.
be. Absolutely.
One final question I have for
Sure.
you. How has your definition of entrepreneurship changed from the beginning of being an entrepreneur till today?
Wow. I'm wow, that's a good question. It requires commitment. It requires commitment, and I didn't realize until I decided this kind of the second venture into this, how committed you really need to be. This is something that it has to be a part of your DNA each and every day, and it's not for the lighthearted or the faint. So, for those of you who are willing to, I always tell people it's kind of like. If you've seen the movie The Matrix, where you take the blue pill or the red pill, right?
Yeah.
When you take that blue pill, that entrepreneurial pill, and and it opens up your eyes to what the life of an entrepreneur is and what the possibilities that exist. It's very difficult to go back. It really is. And I'm not knocking anyone that has a career and works hard for a firm. And that's you can be very successful and that can be very rewarding for you as well. But for those of us who brains aren't quite wired that way, doing this is such a rewarding and liberating experience, but a challenge every day. And I use the term, it's a little crass, but I'll use it. I said, you eat what you kill. And so you're always out there hunting and
Right.
promoting and looking for the next opportunity. But that's what wakes you up every morning. It makes you alive. It makes you know that you have the ability to control your own destiny.
I love that. Well, we'll
Thank you.
end on that note. This has been a great and rewarding opportunity for us. For those listeners, we've been with Christopher Kunney, a managing partner at Infinite Options Technology Consulting. Thank you so much for being with us today,
You're
Christopher.
very welcome. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share, my story with you and your audience. And if there's anything I can do to help any, organization out there that's struggling, our firm is here to serve you. If there are others who need some advice, mentoring, we as an organization are more than happy to do that as well. We do a lot.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, if you'd hang on for just a minute
Sure.
longer, I'm going to go ahead and end the show, and I'd love to chat with you for just a minute longer.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, and thanks so much for our listeners, and we hope you make it a great day.